Hi, I'm Ria and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about Britney Spears and I want to do a Vedic astrology case study on her particular birth chart because I find it fascinating how the planets really explain to us everything that she's been through in her life, with all due respect to her privacy, due to the fact that she's so famous. All these events in her life have been made public to us, and I think as astrologers we can really use this as an example to really showcase how accurately the planets can predict certain events in our life. This is why I'm so passionate about Vedic astrology. So let's begin. I'm gonna put up her chart here. Britney Spears is a Virgo ascendant and she has Saturn on her first house. Now, the first house is the most important house in Vedic astrology because it represents you. It represents your entire life path. So when there is the strongest malefic Saturn on the ascendant, on the life path, it means that there will be obstacles. The person cannot expect to just sail by easily in their life with Saturn in the first house. That is just in a general way, like that's the first thing we can see. And not only is Saturn on her ascendant, but it's her sixth house lord, because her sixth house is in Aquarius. And in Vedic astrology, we use traditional rulerships. Aquarius is not ruled by Uranus in Vedic astrology, it's ruled by Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. So her sixth house energy is coming into the first house. What is sixth house? Conflicts, enemies, litigations. And if you know about Britney's life, you know that she spent years in the courts, in litigations, dealing with enemies, people who didn't have her best interest at heart, unfortunately. So we can definitely see that right away. And what's really fascinating is that all the tragic events started during her Rahu moon dasha. And if you look closely at the chart, Rahu's dispositor is the moon. And the moon is with Ketu. So when her Rahu moon dasha started, it activated Rahu and Ketu, both of the nodes. And we know that this is so karmic. Rahu dasha is never easy. It creates a lot of confusion, a lot of stress. But now Rahu and Ketu got activated. And her moon is in Shravana nakshatra. Shravana nakshatra people are very, very sensitive. Shravana's nakshatra lord is the moon, and the moon is such a receptive planet. It's feminine energy, right? And feminine energy is fragile, it's vulnerable, it only can receive energy, and that's why we need feminine energy and masculine energy to protect us, because it's those masculine planets that are going to make sure that we don't get eaten alive by this world. So Rahu moon was a very vulnerable period in her life, and she was unfortunately surrounded with the wrong people, and that led to a series of unfortunate events for her. But now, not only both of the nodes were activated, Rahu and Ketu, but the sixth house was also activated because Ketu and the moon's dispositor is Saturn, and Saturn is ruling the sixth house. So Rahu Ketu was involved and the sixth house was involved. And I mean, that tells pretty much the whole story. Courts, losses, conflicts, stress, also a lot of mental health issues. The sixth house also deals with our health. And whatever house Saturn rules really shows where we have difficulty in those areas of life. And not only did she already have a predisposition to, having difficulties with the sixth house, But then the nodes just activated it even more strongly, because we can see Rahu is aspecting her third house. Third house is how we manage our life. Third house is our free will, okay? And I should mention Mercury is in her third house. In an enemy sign, combust the sun. The sun represents the father. Mercury represents our decision-making ability. And Mercury combust by the sun quite literally here means her father completely burned off her decision-making ability when she was under the conservatorship of her father. I mean, it can't get more literal than this, you know? And Rahu aspecting that Mercury that's already in bad shape, you know, combust by the sun and in an enemy sign. Rahu is illusions. So Rahu being in her 11th house representing social circles, she definitely had illusions about the people who were around her, you know, that caused her to trust people that were untrustworthy. Rahu represents tricksters, criminals, ill-intentioned people. Rahu is a malefic. It can give great gains in the 11th house, and we'll cover that in the second part of this video. The non-living karaka, like fame, success, Rahu definitely got that for her in the 11th house of gains. But the living karaka, concerning her social circle and even on a greater scale the media, I mean, they had no sympathy at all for what she was going through. Everybody just wanted to cash out on her weakness, basically. Her ex-husband wanted to take advantage of her ex-manager, even her family. And Rahu is not only aspecting her third house of intellect, of managing our life or free will, it's also casting a spell on the 7th house of relationships. And she definitely had illusions when it came to her relationships. Not to mention that Venus, the karaka for relationships, is with Ketu. So we can definitely see issues in her relationships. Also, in her 5th house representing children, she has Ketu there. Ketu means separation, losses. It's very karmic placement. And during the dasha of Rahu moon, where Rahu and Ketu got activated, she lost custody of her children. So we can see all of that in her chart, all of the tragic events, you know. But I also want to mention a very important principle in Vedic astrology that my guru taught me, and that absolutely makes sense and can clearly be seen in Britney Spears' life. Jeeva karaka, ajeeva karaka. So in her birth chart, we can see that the living significances of her birth chart got really burned down. I mean, her relationships with her family, the media, her children, I mean, everything that involves other people was just completely afflicted by all of these placements that we can see in her chart. But all of the non-living significances, like fame and career success, can also be seen by those same combinations. For example, her 5th house with Moon, Venus, Ketu is what made her such a famous entertainer. The 5th house is the house of talent, of entertainment, of arts. And she was one of the most famous artists in her era. Venus and Moon are 2 feminine planets, giving her so much charm. You know, she's a very likable personality. I mean, you can't help but feel for Britney and what she went through. And, you know, even though she didn't make the best choices, she is generally a well-liked person that people can relate to. This is the effect of Venus moon in the 5th house. And moon in the 5th house also gives fame. You know, this house really made her famous. But it's also the house that shows loss of her children. So see here the living significances of this house. Her children was completely spoiled, but the non-living significances, her career as an entertainer, thrived. Even Rahu in the 11th shows everyone in her social circle tried to cheat her. But Rahu in the 11th also is part of what made her so wealthy. The 11th house is gains, and Rahu is a very expansive planet, and when it comes to materialistic things like wealth, Rahu is a great planet. So you see how it's not black and white. In a chart, there's always going to be negative aspects and positive aspects. Now let's take a look at her D9. Her D9 is so powerful. I mean, she was aligned with her career since she was a child, okay? And look at that, Jupiter and Mars in Sagittarius in the 10th house of her D9. I mean, two powerful fiery planets in good dignity, Jupiter in its own sign in the 10th house. How much more powerful can you get? I mean, this shows how ambitious and driven and powerful she was when it came to her career. Also in the D9, Rahu is in the 5th house. It shows that she focused all her energy on her 5th house of entertainment, of creativity, of arts, dancing. She was really, really talented and good at it. We can see that in her D1, 3 planets in the 5th house, and the node being there really amplifies the energy of Venus and Moon. Now let's take a look at her D10. Now in her D10, in her 5th house, she's got Sun and Jupiter in Sagittarius in the 5th house. Again, so much power, so much fire energy going into that creative pursuit. Like, she was aligned with her career since she was a child. I mean, this is really, really powerful here. And Mars is in her 10th house, which is another fiery planet that brings so much drive and ambition wherever it's sitting, regarding the significances of the house it's sitting in. Now here, Mars is in Taurus. I mean, it's in neutral dignity. So, you know, Venus and Mars are neutral to each other, but Taurus is the sign of wealth in her 10th house with Mars, and combined with all the other aspects we just mentioned, it's just such a powerful combination. You know, in astrology, everything is an addition. Like, let me pull up the D1 again. Let's just take a look at her D1 again. So Rahu in the 11th house doesn't always mean that you will get cheated by everyone around you. But in Britney's case, it was this combined with Rahu's aspect on the 3rd and the 7th house, plus the fact that her Mercury, her decision-making ability, got completely combusted by the sun and was already in bad dignity. It's the combination of these aspects that really made her a prey to ill-intentioned people, especially with her mega wealth. That definitely created all the circumstances, you know, that definitely planted the seeds for that to happen, unfortunately. So if you have Rahu in the 11th house, don't freak out and start getting super paranoid about everyone around you. You really can't study your own chart through, you know, studying each aspect separately. It's a combination of elements. And, you know, like 2 people with Rahu in the same placement can have completely different meanings depending on the dispositor, the dignity of the dispositor, what house the dispositor is in, any conjunctions and aspects. So really, this is not meant to generalize. This is just a case study to really understand, like, how did things go so downhill for Britney? You know, like, such a beautiful, talented girl, woman, you know, have all these unfortunate events happen to her. And this is not to say that we are doomed by our astrological chart. I mean, had Britney went to an astrologer, then maybe she would have been more careful of who she surrounded herself with. Maybe she wouldn't have been so trusting, you know? And, you know, I realized that certain karmas just have to play out, you know? Certain karmas are too strong and they just have to let it play out. But other times, we can really work on ourselves. I mean, our chart is supposed to show us our weaknesses so we know what to look out for, what to watch out for. And the dashas, it's such a powerful, powerful prediction tool. The dashas and the transits. And this is why I switched from Western astrology to Vedic astrology, because nothing matched the amount of knowledge and accuracy that we get with Vedic astrology. The dasha system is just another level. I mean, you can feel it. You can feel it. Once I ended my Jupiter antardasha, I'm going through Rahu dasha right now, and Rahu always kind of makes everything feel a little bit crazy. But my Rahu Jupiter was amazing. As soon as I started my Saturn antardasha, I really could feel the shift in energy. It's like you walk into another room. It's so crazy how you can just feel it. The energy changes. And Saturn can be a wonderful planet for certain people because it can give the results, but it will always come with a heaviness. It's a heavy energy. And Jupiter, even if it's in bad dignity or it's afflicted, it's just an easier energy to deal with overall, and we can really feel those energies going into these dashas. It's such a big theme in our life. So I hope that this was helpful. Leave a comment down below. Let me know whose chart you want me to study next, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.